Pastor Chioma, have you been drinking alcohol?
Jesus, Pastor!
Pastor Chioma's phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m. She reached for it in the darkness of her bedroom, her heart still racing from what she'd just done. The message was from her husband, Chidi. Just landed in Dubai. Another long week ahead. Love you. She stared at the screen, guilt washing over her like acid. Just 30 minutes ago, she'd been in a hotel room in Asokoro with another man. Now her husband was texting her, love you, from thousands of miles away. Her hands trembled as she typed back, safe travels, love you too. The lies were becoming easier. That's what terrified her most. She lay back on her bed in their large home in Maitama, Abuja, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent, empty, just like it had been for the past 3 years, just like it would be for another week until Chidi returned from whatever international business deal was consuming his life this time. Pastor Chioma closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. It never did anymore. Not without the vodka she kept hidden in a locked drawer in her closet, disguised in a water bottle. Sunday morning came too quickly. Pastor Chioma stood in front of her bathroom mirror, transforming herself from the broken woman who'd cried herself to sleep at 4 a.m. into the powerful woman of God that 8,000 church members expected to see. Makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes, a bright yellow dress that screamed joy and victory, her signature smile that had graced the cover of 3 Christian magazines this year alone. Greater Life Assembly, Abuja, was written across her Bible cover in gold letters. She was the senior pastor of one of the fastest growing churches in Nigeria's capital. Her midweek services attracted more people than most churches saw on Sunday. Her annual women's conference, Destined for Greatness, drew attendees from across West Africa. At 38 years old, Pastor Chioma Nwachukwu was at the peak of her ministry. She was also falling apart. Mummy, are you ready? Her daughter Adana called from downstairs. At 15, Adana was becoming more independent, more aware. Sometimes Chioma caught her daughter looking at her with questions in her eyes, questions Chioma prayed she'd never have to answer. Coming, darling, she called back, her voice bright and cheerful. Just another Sunday, just another performance. It hadn't always been this way. When Chioma married Chidi 12 years ago, he'd been a mid-level executive at an oil and gas company. He traveled occasionally, but he was home most nights. They had dinner together. They talked. They laughed. They made love. They were partners. Then 7 years into their marriage, Chidi got promoted to regional director for West Africa. Suddenly, he was traveling 3 weeks out of every month. Lagos, Port Harcourt, Ghana, South Africa, London, Dubai, Houston. At first, Chioma was supportive. This is God's blessing on your career, she told him. We'll make it work. And they tried. Video calls every night, long text conversations. He'd bring her gifts from every country. Perfume from Paris, chocolate from Belgium, designer shoes from Italy. But you can't hold perfume when you're lonely at night. You can't have a conversation with chocolate when you need someone to talk to about the pressure you're under. Designer shoes don't keep you warm when you're afraid. Their daughter Adana learned to celebrate birthdays with only her mother present. School events had an empty seat where Chidi should have been. Daddy's traveling became the family's most common phrase. The church grew. Pastor Chioma's responsibilities multiplied. Board meetings, counseling sessions, building projects, media interviews, staff issues, financial decisions. She was carrying the weight of thousands of people's spiritual lives on her shoulders, and she was doing it alone. She tried to talk to Chidi about it. During one of his brief visits home, she'd said, I need you here. I need my husband. I know, baby, he'd replied, distracted by emails on his phone. Just a few more years. I'm positioning us for early retirement. Then I'll be home all the time. But a few more years felt like forever when you were drowning today. It started innocently enough. 6 months ago, Pastor Chioma had been invited to speak at a leadership conference at Transcorp Hilton. After her session, a man approached her at the hotel bar where she was having juice. That was powerful, he said, extending his hand. I'm Tunde. I run a tech startup here in Abuja. He was handsome, well-dressed, articulate, and most importantly, he was present, right there. Not in Dubai or Ghana or South Africa. Thank you, she'd said, shaking his hand. I'm glad it blessed you. Can I buy you a drink, he'd asked. "Oh, I don't drink alcohol," she'd said quickly. It was true then. "Orange juice it is," he'd smiled. They'd talked for 2 hours about business, about Abuja, about dreams and challenges. It felt good to have an adult conversation that didn't involve church politics or sermons or spiritual warfare. It felt good to laugh. It felt good to be seen. Before she left, Tunde had asked for her number. "Just as friends," he'd said. "It's rare to meet someone in the city you can have a real conversation with." She'd given it to him. Just as friends, she told herself. The text messages started the next day. Good morning messages. Funny memes, articles he thought she'd find interesting. Nothing inappropriate, nothing wrong. But it filled a void. 3 weeks later, they met for coffee, then lunch, then dinner. Always in public places, always appropriate. But the emotional intimacy was growing, and Chioma didn't stop it. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at church where she'd had to terminate a staff member for financial misconduct, she texted Tunde, "Today was terrible. I wish I could just disappear." His response came immediately. "Come to mine. I'll cook dinner. You need to decompress." She knew she shouldn't go. Every fiber of her being that still remembered who she was screamed at her not to go. But she went anyway. That night changed everything. Tunde's apartment in Jabi was tastefully decorated, masculine but warm. He'd made pepper soup and rice. They ate. They talked. He listened to her in a way Chidi hadn't listened to her in years. "You carry so much," Tunde said softly. "Who carries you?" The question broke something inside her. Tears started flowing before she could stop them. Years of loneliness, years of pretending to be strong, years of being everyone's pastor but nobody's priority. Tunde held her while she cried, and when she looked up at him through her tears, he kissed her. She should have pulled away. She should have left. She should have remembered her vows, her calling, her God. But she didn't. That night, Pastor Chioma committed adultery for the first time in her marriage. She drove home at 2 a.m., her entire body shaking. She threw up in her bathroom. She got in the shower and scrubbed her skin until it was raw. She fell on her knees and prayed for forgiveness. But 2 weeks later, when Chidi was in Houston and she was lonely again, she went back to Tunde's apartment. And then it wasn't 2 weeks. It was 1 week, then twice a week. Then whenever Chidi was traveling, which was almost always, the guilt was consuming her. Every Sunday, she stood behind the pulpit preaching about holiness, about faithfulness, about the power of living right. And every Sunday, she felt like the biggest hypocrite in all of Abuja. The anxiety attacks started 3 months into the affair. Her heart would race. Her hands would shake. She couldn't breathe. One of her board members suggested she see a doctor. The doctor prescribed medication for anxiety and suggested she might be dealing with depression. But Pastor Chioma knew the real problem wasn't medical. It was spiritual, moral. She was living a double life, and it was destroying her from the inside out. That's when she discovered that alcohol helped. Just a little vodka before bed helped her sleep. Just a little vodka before counseling sessions helped her anxiety. Just a little vodka before preaching helped steady her nerves. She was careful. Always vodka because it had no smell. Always in private. Always rinsing her mouth thoroughly. Always using mints and perfume. Nobody knew. Not her assistant. Not her daughter. Not her board members. Not Chidi. She was the perfect pastor. The anointed woman of God. The voice of righteousness in Abuja. And she was a fraud. There were moments when she almost got caught. One Saturday evening, Adana knocked on her bedroom door while Chioma was pouring vodka into her water bottle. She'd barely managed to hide it before her daughter entered. "Mummy, are you okay?" Adana had asked, concern in her young eyes. "Of course, baby. Why do you ask?" "You seem different lately. Sad. Even when you're smiling." Pastor Chioma's heart had nearly stopped. If her 15-year-old daughter could see through her mask, who else could? "I'm fine, darling. Just tired from ministry work. You know how it is." But Adana's eyes said she didn't believe her mother. Another close call came when Chidi made a surprise visit home. He wasn't supposed to be back from South Africa for another week, but his meeting ended early. He'd arrived at 10 p.m. on a Thursday night. Chioma had been at Tunde's apartment. When she saw Chidi's text saying, "Surprise, I'm home early. Where are you?" her blood ran cold. She'd rushed home, making up a story about a late emergency counseling session at church. Chidi had believed her, but it had been too close. She'd promised herself that night that she would stop, that she would get her life together. But the next time Chidi left for Lagos, loneliness consumed her again, and she was back in Tunde's arms. She was addicted, not just to the affair, but to feeling wanted, to feeling seen, to feeling like she mattered to someone beyond what she could do for them. Meanwhile, the church was growing exponentially. Greater Life Assembly Abuja had just purchased land to build a new 15,000-seat auditorium. The project required Pastor Chioma to be even more visible, even more perfect, even more anointed. The media attention intensified. Interview requests flooded in. Other pastors wanted her to speak at their churches. Christian TV stations wanted her on their programs. Everyone wanted a piece of Pastor Chioma. Everyone except the one person whose attention she actually craved, her husband. Chidi was proud of her success, but in a distant way. When he was home, he'd ask about church numbers and building projects, but never about her. Never about how she was holding up under the pressure. Never about what she needed. Their sex life had become non-existent. Chidi was always too tired from traveling, and Chioma felt too guilty to be intimate with her husband when she was sleeping with another man. They'd become roommates who occasionally occupied the same house. Business partners in raising their daughter, strangers who shared a last name. The vodka consumption increased. What started as a shot before bed became 3 shots, then 4, then drinking throughout the day, hidden in her office at church in her water bottle. Her assistant, Sister Blessing, started noticing things. "Pastor, you've been taking a lot of mints lately," she'd commented innocently one day. "Oh, you know me. I hate bad breath," Chioma had laughed it off. But Sister Blessing's eyes had lingered on her a moment too long. Everything came crashing down on a Wednesday night in November. Greater Life Assembly had its weekly prayer meeting. Pastor Chioma had been looking forward to it because Chidi was in London, which meant she could see Tunde afterward. She'd had more vodka than usual that afternoon. The bottle was almost empty, and she'd promised herself she'd get through the prayer meeting, then go buy another one. The service started normally. Worship, testimonies, prayer requests. Then Pastor Chioma stood up to lead the closing prayer. "Let us pray," she said, and something felt wrong immediately. The room tilted slightly. Her words slurred just a bit. "Fatter, Lord," she began, the wrong words. Her tongue felt thick. The congregation shifted uncomfortably. She tried to correct herself. "Sorry, Father Lord. I mean, our heavenly," she stumbled, catching herself on the podium. The room was spinning now. "Pastor, are you okay?" one of the associate pastors asked, rushing to her side. "I'm fine," she tried to say, but it came out, "I'm fine." Sister Blessing appeared at her other side, her face full of concern and something else. Realization. "Get her to the office," Sister Blessing whispered urgently to the associate pastor. "Now." They practically carried her off the platform. The congregation watched in stunned silence as their senior pastor was led away, clearly not herself. In her office, Sister Blessing closed the door and locked it. "Pastor Chioma," she said firmly, "have you been drinking?" "No," Chioma protested, but even to her own ears, the denial was pathetic. Sister Blessing walked to Chioma's desk and opened the bottom drawer where Chioma thought she'd hidden her vodka bottle, but it wasn't hidden well enough. Sister Blessing held up the bottle, half empty, labeled water. "Pastor," Sister Blessing's voice broke. "How long has this been going on?" Chioma stared at the bottle in her assistant's hands, and the dam finally broke. "I don't know," she wept. "Months. I don't know. I can't do this anymore, Blessing. I can't." Sister Blessing did something that saved Pastor Chioma's life that night. Instead of judging her, instead of running to the church board, instead of gossiping, she called a trusted friend who ran a Christian rehabilitation center outside Abuja. "My pastor needs help," Sister Blessing said simply. "Tonight." By midnight, Pastor Chioma was checked into Hope Springs Recovery Center in Suleja under a fake name to protect her privacy. The church was told she had a medical emergency and would be taking a brief leave. The center required her to surrender her phone, no contact with the outside world for the first 72 hours, which meant she couldn't contact Tunde, she couldn't warn him, she couldn't prepare him, and she couldn't answer when her phone rang 15 times that night with his calls. Tunde, worried and confused about why Pastor Chioma wasn't responding, made a decision that would prove catastrophic. He went to Greater Life Assembly Church the next morning to look for her. He asked church workers if Pastor Chioma was there. He described her. He said they were friends. He said it was urgent. Word spread quickly through the church staff. Why was a strange man looking for their pastor so desperately? What kind of friendship was this? Sister Blessing, trying to protect her pastor, told Tunde firmly that Pastor Chioma was unavailable and he should stop coming to the church. But the damage was done. Questions were being asked, and then someone recognized Tunde. One of the church ushers, a young man named Emeka, had seen Pastor Chioma and Tunde together at a restaurant in Woostu 2 weeks earlier. At the time, he'd thought nothing of it, maybe a counseling session, maybe a church donor. But now, with this strange man showing up at church asking for the pastor with such familiarity, Emeka's mind began connecting dots he didn't want to connect. He went to one of the elders. Then that elder went to another. Then whispers started spreading. On her 4th day at Hope Springs, Pastor Chioma was informed she had visitors. She walked into the conference room to find 5 people: her assistant, Sister Blessing, 2 church board members, Elder Johnson and Elder Mrs. Adeyemi, and worst of all, her husband Chidi, who'd been called back from London, and their daughter Adana. The look on Chidi's face told her that he knew everything. "Sit down, Chioma," Elder Johnson said. It wasn't a request. She sat, her hands trembling. Elder Mrs. Adeyemi spoke first, her voice gentle but firm. "Pastor, we need you to be honest with us. There are rumors circulating about you and a man named Tunde, about alcohol. We need to know the truth." Chioma looked at her daughter, whose eyes were filled with tears and confusion. She looked at her husband, whose face was a mask of pain and betrayal. She looked at Sister Blessing, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. The truth. After months of lies, they wanted the truth. "It's true," Chioma whispered. "All of it. I've been having an affair. I've been drinking. I've been living a lie." Adana let out a sob and ran from the room. Chidi closed his eyes, his jaw clenched tight. The board members looked at each other with expressions of devastation. "How long?" Chidi asked, his voice barely controlled. "The affair, 6 months. The drinking, 3 months." "Why?" This time his voice broke. Chioma looked at her husband, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. "Because I was lonely, Chidi. Because you're never home. Because I'm carrying the weight of thousands of people's lives and I have no one carrying me. Because I needed someone to see me, to want me, to make me feel like I was more than just Pastor Chioma." "So you slept with another man?" Chidi's voice rose. "So you became a drunk? That's your solution?" "I'm not making excuses," Chioma shouted back, her own pain finally erupting. "What I did was wrong. It was sin. I know that. But you abandoned me, Chidi. You chose your career over your family. You're never home. When was the last time you asked me how I was really doing? When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you made love to your wife?" The room fell silent. "I needed you," Chioma continued, tears streaming down her face. "And you weren't there. You haven't been there for 3 years. I'm not blaming you for my choices. But I'm telling you why I was vulnerable to making them." Chidi stood up abruptly and walked out of the room without another word. Pastor Chioma stayed at Hope Springs for 30 days of intensive treatment for alcohol dependency and counseling for her emotional issues. But the church couldn't keep her absence quiet for that long. People asked questions, staff members talked, and eventually the rumors reached the media. Popular Abuja pastor in rehab for alcohol abuse read the headline in one of Abuja's tabloid blogs. "Pastor Chioma's secret affair exposed," screamed another. The story went viral within hours. Pastor Chioma scandal trended on Twitter. WhatsApp groups exploded with gossip. Other pastors in Abuja were asked to comment. Some condemned her, some remained silent. A few who had walked similar dark valleys themselves offered grace. The church board called an emergency meeting. Greater Life Assembly's reputation was in tatters. Donors were pulling out, members were leaving. The media was camped outside the church building. "She has to resign," one board member insisted. "We can't recover from this with her still as pastor." "She needs to be restored, not discarded," another argued. "Isn't that what we preach? Isn't that what we preach? Redemption? Redemption doesn't mean no consequences," a third countered. The Bible is clear about leadership qualifications. She's disqualified herself. The debate raged for hours. Meanwhile, at Hope Springs Recovery Center, Pastor Chioma watched her entire life crumble from a distance. She wasn't allowed social media or news access, but Sister Blessing visited and gently told her what was happening. "The church is splitting over you," Blessing said sadly. "Half want you restored, half want you removed. It's getting ugly." Chioma closed her eyes. She'd built Greater Life Assembly from 30 people in a rented hall to 8,000 members in a custom-built facility. 15 years of ministry. Thousands of lives changed, marriages restored, people saved. And now, because of her sin, it was all falling apart. "What have I done?" she whispered. After 30 days, Pastor Chioma completed her treatment program. She was sober. She'd done deep work on her emotional trauma, her codependency, her need for validation. She'd confessed her sins fully. She'd begun the long road to healing. But healing doesn't erase consequences. Her marriage was in critical condition. Chidi had moved into the guest room when she returned home. He was civil but distant. He'd agreed to marriage counseling, but his eyes held a pain that might never fully heal. Adana was barely speaking to her. The hero worship in her daughter's eyes had been replaced with dismay and confusion. And the church was another matter entirely. The board scheduled a meeting. All members were invited. The sanctuary was packed. Media trucks lined the parking lot. Security had to turn people away at the doors. Pastor Chioma walked into her own church feeling like a stranger. She wore a simple black dress, no makeup, no pretense, no performance. The board chairman, Elder Johnson, spoke first. "We are here tonight to address the situation with Pastor Chioma. She has asked to speak to the congregation. After she speaks, the board will announce our decision regarding her future with Greater Life Assembly." Every eye turned to Chioma as she walked slowly to the pulpit, the same pulpit where she'd preached countless sermons about righteousness, about holiness, about living above sin. She gripped the edges of the podium, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. "I stand before you tonight not as your pastor, but as a broken woman who desperately needs God's grace and your forgiveness." She paused, gathering strength. 6 months ago, I began an extramarital affair. 3 months ago, I began drinking alcohol to numb my pain and guilt. I lied to you. I lied to my family. I lied to God, and I lied to myself. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the congregation. Hearing her confess it publicly made it more real, more devastating. "I have no excuses. What I did was wrong, sinful, hypocritical. I preached standards I wasn't living up to. I told you to be faithful while I was committing adultery. I told you to be filled with the Spirit while I was filling myself with vodka." Tears were flowing freely now, but she didn't wipe them away. "I was lonely. My husband travels constantly. I felt abandoned and unseen. But that doesn't justify my choices. Millions of people experience loneliness without committing adultery or becoming alcoholics. I made those choices. I own them." She looked around the sanctuary at faces she'd known for years. Some were crying with her, some were angry, some were stone-faced. "I don't know if I'll ever stand behind this pulpit as your pastor again. That's not my decision to make. But I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. Sorry for failing you. Sorry for damaging the reputation of this church. Sorry for making the gospel look foolish through my actions. I'm getting help. I'm sober. I'm in intensive marriage counseling. I'm doing the hard work of rebuilding trust and integrity, not because I want my position back, but because I want my soul back. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that God's grace is sufficient even for someone like me, someone who fell from the highest place to the lowest, someone who betrayed everything she claimed to believe. If you're watching this and you're struggling with secret sin, please don't wait until it destroys everything to get help. Confess it. Deal with it. Let people in. Don't do what I did. Don't let pride and shame keep you in bondage until you lose everything." Then she walked off the platform and sat in the front row, waiting for the board's decision. Elder Johnson returned to the podium. "The board has deliberated extensively about Pastor Chioma's future with Greater Life Assembly. This has been one of the most difficult decisions we've ever had to make. Pastor Chioma has confessed her sins. She's shown genuine repentance. She's sought treatment and counseling. These are all biblical steps toward restoration." Hope flickered in Chioma's chest. "However," Elder Johnson continued, "the Bible is also clear about the qualifications for church leadership. 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 give us specific standards. While we believe in redemption and restoration for all believers, leadership is a different matter." Chioma felt the hope dying. Therefore, effective immediately, Pastor Chioma Nwachukwu is stepping down as senior pastor of Greater Life Assembly. She will take a minimum 2-year sabbatical from all ministry leadership. During this time, she will focus on her marriage, her family, her sobriety, and her personal healing. Chioma nodded slowly. She'd expected this. She deserved this. However, Elder Johnson's voice softened. We are not throwing her away. She is still our sister in Christ. She will receive financial support during this sabbatical. She will have access to ongoing counseling, and after the 2 years, the board will reassess whether restoration to any ministry capacity is appropriate. The church will be led by our associate pastors until we determine God's direction for permanent leadership. We ask that you give Pastor Chioma and her family privacy during this difficult season. We ask that you resist the urge to gossip or judge. We ask that you remember we are all sinners saved by grace. Some sins are just more public than others. 2 years later, the house in Maitama was quieter now. Chioma spent her days differently. She woke up early and read her Bible, not to prepare sermons, but to feed her own soul. She attended a recovery meeting 3 times a week, sharing her story with other people fighting addiction. She volunteered at a women's shelter, counseling women who'd made mistakes like hers. Her marriage to Chidi was still fragile, but it was healing. He'd made changes too. He'd taken a less demanding position that kept him in Abuja. He was home most nights now. They had dinner together. They talked, really talked. They'd started dating again like they were getting to know each other for the first time. It was awkward sometimes, painful often, but it was real. Adana had slowly begun to forgive her mother. The anger had softened into understanding. One night, her daughter had hugged her and whispered, "You're not perfect, Mom, but you're honest now. That's what matters." Greater Life Assembly was doing well under new leadership. Chioma attended services in the back row sometimes, just another member of the congregation. It hurt to see someone else behind the pulpit she'd built her life around, but it was also strangely freeing. She wasn't Pastor Chioma anymore. She was just Chioma, a woman, a wife, a mother, a recovering alcoholic, a forgiven adulteress, a work in progress. One Sunday after service, a young woman approached her in the parking lot. "Mrs. Chioma," the woman said nervously, "can I talk to you?" "Of course." I've been having an affair. I'm a worship leader at another church. Nobody knows, but watching what happened to you, it scared me. I don't want to lose everything like you did. Can you help me?" Chioma looked at this young woman, seeing her own past reflected back at her. "Yes," she said softly. "I can help you. Let's get coffee and talk." As they walked toward the parking lot together, Chioma realized something profound. Her greatest ministry wasn't happening from a pulpit anymore. It was happening in the mess, in the brokenness, in the honest, painful, beautiful work of helping people who were walking the same dark roads she'd walked. Her fall had been public and devastating, but maybe, just maybe, her redemption could help others avoid the same cliff. And maybe that was worth more than any sermon she'd ever preached. Life lessons from the secret life of Pastor Chioma. Chioma's affair didn't begin with attraction to another man. It began with years of emotional neglect and loneliness in her marriage. The lesson: never ignore persistent loneliness in your relationship. When you feel consistently unseen, unheard, or unvalued by your spouse, that's not something to pray away alone. It's something to address directly and urgently with your partner. Loneliness creates vulnerability that others can exploit. Action point: if you're feeling lonely in your marriage, speak up before resentment builds. If your spouse tells you they're lonely, treat it as a crisis, not a complaint.